And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, today I'm talking about the last expansion for Dominion. Oh wait, I said that last time. This is, really, they said last time that the expansion was the final one, but apparently not, because lo and behold, here we have Dominion Adventures, which is the newest expansion for Dominion. Okay, that's fine. We always want more cards for Dominion. This is a big expansion. It is the 9th expansion, which means it's the 10th box you've bought if you've bought some of everything. There's a lot of different things involved in each of these sets, and sets have tended to be a little bit more complex as time goes by. Let's take a look at what's inside this one. The first thing this expansion adds are what are called events. Now, it says to shuffle them into your randomizer deck, but I mean, really, you can just shuffle the events, and you can draw a certain number of them to put in play in the game. They recommend 2, and I highly stand by that. You should do 2. Now, these events are basically what they are is you put them out. They don't take the place of one of the 10 decks of cards. Instead, these are cards that you can pay for. It counts as your buy in Dominion, but gives you an action instead. So for example here, when you do the plan, you spend 3 and it lets you move your trashing token. Everyone starts with a trashing token to an action supply pile. And whenever you buy a card from that action pile, you can trash a card from your hand. So this might be something good to do at the very beginning of the game. It lets you trash cards from your hand when you buy a specific action card. It may not be great, but it's only cost 3 to do. There's, like this one here, basically, is a free one. You can discard an attack, 2 curses, or 6 cards. And if you do that, you gain a gold. It's a quest type thing. This one's very expensive. Inheritance. Once per game, you can set aside a victory action card from the supply, costing up to 4. You then place your estate token by it, and each person starts with a token for that too. And then your estates count as that action. This is a really cool one. In fact, this is my favorite event, because essentially this will make your estate cards into an action card, which makes them worth buying, because now you buy them, it's an action card, and it's worth a point at the end of the game. But again, this costs 7. Now, there's things that affect action cards that don't affect these cards. You know, you can't double them with the throne room, etc. But again, there's something you buy and you immediately do it. Here's alms. If you don't have any treasures in play, you can gain a card that costs up to 4. If you're poor, that one works. A mission here. If this one lets you take a double turn, essentially. Training here. This one costs 6. And you can take a +1 token here and put it on his action supply pile. When you play a card, you get a +1. So essentially it lets you change a card to a +1. So maybe you're playing with Village. Now Village lets you draw a card, take 2 actions, and it's +1 gold. So some really neat stuff here. And these add to the randomization of the game itself by putting 2 of them out. And again, you could put out more, but I think that would just cause too much chaos. Now let's take a look at some of the cards in the game. We have some new, cards of all different types. So here we have, for example, we have a treasure card. Here it's just it's a cost 5 and it's a 2. And when you play it, you get a gold and a copper, which is kind of intriguing because you want the gold, but you don't necessarily want the copper. A very interesting style card will fill if you like playing big money. That's for you. And there's also a relic here. Now, what this relic one does is when you play this here, every other player puts a -1 card token on their deck. So what players will do is they have their deck here, and they have their -1 token on top of it. And when it's time for them to draw cards, they lose this, and then they would draw cards. So essentially, you're causing them to lose 1 card. So you notice there's a lot of tokens in this game. You don't need to have them all out. You just pull out the tokens that are being used in any because of whatever particular cards are out there. The magpie is like a replicating thing. It lets you pull treasures from your deck. It reminds me of the rats a little bit. The magpie pile almost always runs out if one person buys it because they just replicate. The ports is a replicating village. whenever you buy this, you get another port, so you get 2 of them. So it's basically a double village. Is that worth it? I think so. It saves you a lot of time. This is almost always one. If this is out and I have 4 on my first turn, this is a great first turn buy. Lost Cities is even better, and I'm sorry, it's Lost City. We always call it Lost Cities. It's the Knizia card. Everyone else gets to draw a card when you play it. And there's lots of interesting cards. There's some more attack cards. This is a more mild version, maybe, of the Saboteur. Still kind of nasty. The Artificer. This is one where you can discard cards. I like that to buy stuff. That's a good idea. Storytelling's a little wonky, but lets you get a whole lot of gold. Raise is a simple card that lets you get rid of cards. And then duration cards. Now, duration cards are not new to this set. They were first introduced in the expansion Seaside. But they're my favorite type of cards, and I'm really glad they're back in this set. Duration cards will have something happen when you play them. So, for example, this one gives you an action, and then something will happen at the beginning of this turn and the next turn. So they stay in front of you for a turn. So, for example, this one here gives you an action and then 2 cards. And then you have to discard 2 cards. So you get an action, draw 2, discard 2. However, your next turn, you will also draw 2 cards and discard 2. So it's something that happens now and later. And there's lots of different ones. Here's a gear one that gives you +2 cards, and you can set aside 2 that you'll use on your next turn. The Bridge Troll, when you put this in front, your cards cost less for you, and other players are going to take their -1 token, which is this thing, and basically that means next turn they're going to lose a coin when they spend stuff. The Haunted Woods will give you 3 cards at the beginning of your next turn, and anyone who buys has to put their hand on top of their deck. The Swamp Hag, while this is in play, everyone who buys a card gets a curse. They're still going to use a curse, but I played a game where there was like 3 Swamp Hags in play, and I decided not to buy a card because getting 3 curses was just not worth it. And then at the start of your next turn, you get 3. And then there's even one here that's mixed with a reaction card where you can play it from your hand when someone else does an attack on you. Then there are these new cards. They're called reserve cards. Now, these cards are important because they come with a reserve. Each person gets one of these. They put it in front of them, and that's the reserve area. When you play these, you do everything above the line. So this says, +1 action, put this on your tavern mat. So this is called the tavern. This is your reserve area. And then later on, you can call it. And that basically means you play it and discard it and do everything underneath the line. So it's something that you can do now, and then you'll get to do something later. Like, for example, this says after you do an action, you can call this to do that action again. So I can play a card. I play this, I get an extra action. Fine, whatever. It just basically plays it for free. But later on, I can duplicate an action. So this is like a preemptive Throne Room card. It's actually a little better than Throne Room because, you know, when you get Throne Room, it seems like you never draw the card at the same time as Throne Room. Here it will work because you can save it. Here's a coin that you can save, and basically will give you +2 actions. Or here, at the start of a turn, you can call this to trash a card from your hand. So the Rat Catcher. And here's one that's mixed with victory points, where you basically can stick them on your tavern mat and leave them there. So when you get it, you can play it as an action, and it gets a victory point card out of your hand. So these are all interesting, but what are my top 10 favorite cards from the set? I know you've been dying to know, so let's take a look at them here. All right, so Transmogrify. This is one of the reserve cards, and I like this one very much because it essentially, you can use it to trash a card from your hand and gain one that costs up to 1 more. So it's not as good as the cards from the original set, but that card goes directly into your hand. So it's neat. You can use this. It's a great way to get rid of curses. It's a good way to upgrade cards into better cards. Very, very much like this one. Then we have Guide. Now, Guide is another one of these reserve cards. At the start of your turn, you basically can use this to discard your hand and draw 5 more. This is a great card. It lets you buy victory points early in the game. You can save this when you have that really bad hand. Boom, the Guide lets you clear that hand out. Amulet's one of the duration cards, and this, I just like the choosing here. You get an extra coin, you can trash a card, or gain a silver. You can do that this turn and next turn. And it's only 3. It's a great first buy. The Ranger. Now the Ranger has a journey token, what's one of the tokens that comes with the game, and you turn your journey token over. It starts face up. If you flip it face up, you get +5 cards. So this is like an every other turn type thing. It gives you +1 buy, but every other time you play it, it's +1 buy and +5 cards. It's crazy cool. Having a couple Rangers lets you flip the tokens often. Miser is one that deals with the coppers. You can either put a copper from your hand onto your tavern mat, or you get +1 for every copper on your tavern mat. This is similar to one of the cards from Seaside, but this one here, not only does it get coppers out of your hand, but it makes them useful, because when you play the Miser, you can get all those coppers on the mat. And this is a great one. You buy a couple Misers, you can get rid of all your coppers, and every time the Miser comes up, then it can be 6, 7 gold, which is, oh man, it's wonderful. The Wine Merchant is great, +1 buy, +4, but then you put him on the tavern mat. He's one of the few that he stays there. You can get him back if you ever have a surplus of 2 gold. Well, if you play Dominion, you know that you often have a surplus of 2 gold, so I like him because that +4 is really powerful. It's better than a gold, and that +1 buy is very nice. You got to pay 2 to get him back, but he's worth it. Then we have Duplicate. Here, when you gain a card costing up to 6, you can call this to gain a copy of this card. So basically, you can buy 2 copies of the same card. That cost up to 6. 2 gold isn't bad, but even 2 of those cards that cost 5 can be very useful. Then we have Hireling. This is a duration card that stays in play for the rest of the game and gives you +1 card. Woo-hoo-hoo! Think about this. You get one of these, now you have a hand of 6. You get 2, you have a hand of 7. Now, yes, they cost 6. But if it's early in the game, I will easily buy this over a gold. And 2 of them, yeah, I'll certainly think about it, because that gives you a huge advantage over your opponents, unless you're playing Militia. Then my favorite card, top 2 cards, I'm going to show them both because they do the same thing. Well, they have different things. This one is a +1 buy, +1 gold. This one's +1 card, +1 action. But when you use these cards, when you use them, basically you're going to, whenever you play this card, you have the option, you don't have to upgrade them. So you'll see that the peasant here upgrades to a soldier, and the page upgrades to a treasure hunter. And both of these cards have better abilities. So you can see here that the treasure hunter is a +1 action, +1 gold, and gives a silver card for each card the person to your right got. This guy gets +1, +2, and +1 for each other attack you have in play. And everybody else has to discard a card if they have 4 or more. So it's kind of cool. And then these can be upgraded. The soldier runs away and becomes a fugitive, and the treasure hunter becomes a warrior. Now the fugitive is +2 cards, +1 action, discard a card. Not that great. While the warrior is +2 cards, and for each other traveler you have in play, that's these things, each other player discards the top card of their deck and trashes it if it's a 3 or 4. Warrior's mean. Fugitive's not that great, but the good thing about the fugitive is that he can become a disciple. You'll see that there's kind of a storyline here while the warrior becomes a hero. Now, these cards are amazing. The disciple lets you play an action card from your hand twice, so it's like lets you double an action card, and then you get another action copy of that card. The hero is +2 and gain a treasure, which is a gold at minimum, or something out there, which is fantastic. And both of these can be upgraded, the hero into a champion and the disciple into a teacher. These are both amazing. The hero, for the rest of the game, you're immune to attacks. That's crazy awesome. And whenever he plays an action, all his actions are +1 action. The teacher lets you take your different tokens that you have, and you can play these. Like I can play whenever I use him, I can put a +1 buy on one of the action card piles. And so whenever I do that, I now have a +1 buy or a +1 action. And so he can move these tokens around. Now, these are the final levels of each of these. But essentially, you can upgrade them and follow the path. Now, you'll have to shuffle through your deck several times to do this, but it can be pretty handy, and I think it adds a little bit of theme to the game. Let me start out by saying this is my 3rd favorite expansion, my favorite being Prosperity, and the second one, Seaside. But before I get into why I like it that much, I do want to mention a couple caveats. First of all, the artwork is better than the original Dominions, but still not stellar. And the components aren't the highest quality in here, like the tokens just aren't that great of quality. And it does add some complexity that people who are new to Dominion or like to keep it on a very basic level, like those 2 cards of mine that are my favorite cards, the Traveler ones. That does add a bit more setup time, and there's a bit more in here, although I would argue that there's less than some of the last sets. There's less than Cornucopia and some of the other sets like that. So that being said, what do I like? I tremendously enjoy the event cards. I think that's a great addition to the game. The game says, you can add more than 2, but that's just pure insanity. Adding 2 of those is fine. Picking the 2 or why you would shuffle them into your cards is beyond me. Just play with 2 of them. Just shuffle the cards and draw 2. And just gives you something to buy and something you do right away. I like that. Maybe you have 3 coins. You don't know what else to do. I mean, normally you buy a silver, but you don't know what else to do. Maybe you might want to take those actions. And it just adds a little bit more to the game without making it too unwieldy. And I think I would use these in most of the games that I play. Also, duration cards. Duration cards are my favorite type of cards, which is why Seaside is one of my favorite expansions. And the orange cards in this one, there's some really cool ones. Like that one, it gives you an extra card. Do I buy that or do I buy a silver? Or a gold. That's a really good choice early on in the game. But getting 6 cards the rest of the game, or even 7, it's mind-boggling. I like duration cards. There's more attack duration cards here. They're sitting there thinking, oh, okay, well, you played a card that gives me a curse when I buy something. That's no big deal. But when there's 3 of them on the table, I don't know that I want to get 3 curses. So duration cards are something that's an easy to understand, but they're neat because like, ooh, I got to do something now and on a future turn. And then there's the reserve cards. The cards that when I first saw them, I thought, I don't know about these because it looked like it was much ado about nothing. But playing with them, they work pretty well. I like that setting aside something to use later. Your ace in the hole, per se. The card that lets you reset all the other cards in your hand. A card that gives you extra actions. A card that lets you take a card from your hand, change it to something else when you most need it. Pretty cool and a good addition. It does add to the length of the game because there's those cards and the cards in your hand. And so I would only recommend it for people who are experienced or advanced players. But they're still pretty neat and I do enjoy them. The rest of the cards are fine. There's all kinds of cool cards. Nothing overly complex. There's not huge walls of text. Those are safe for the Dominion rulebook. But they're pretty simple to understand. There's a few where people are like, but for the most part, very easy to play. And I would recommend this for people very highly. I like it very much. I don't like it as much as, like I said, Prosperity and Seaside. I would still recommend Seaside as the expansion that people get first when they're buying expansions for Dominion. But it's pretty easy to jump into. It's not like the people at Dominion ran out of ideas and now they're doing weird stuff. I mean, there's a little of that. But the event cards feel like they could have been added the very first game. There's something that just put seamlessly into the game. The extra cards, some of them are a little wonky, but again, they're not nearly as wonky as the last 3 sets. This is kind of a rebound, I think, for Dominion. Although the last set was a pretty decent set too, Dark Age. This one is up farther and feels like it could have been one of the first expansions that was put out by the group. So, I like it. It's obviously more cards for Dominion is always a good thing, but some of my favorite cards ever might be in this set. Dice Tower Judgment into my collection.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door!